This one's tough, guys. This one's very, very tough. Joe Laurinaitis, aka Road Warrior Animal, passed away today at the age of 60. After all these years after Hawk's passing, Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors, are reunited in the afterlife. Only Paul Ellering of the original trio remains. And it hurts. It really fucking hurts. In my opinion, and the opinion of others, but just speaking for me, the Road Warriors are the greatest tag team of all time. They raised the bar for how tag teams should be presented. They were, a great main event draw in various promotions, even in Japan, All Japan. They really, did great there for Giant Baba. I can't go over every single detail of their careers. They've been encapsulated in, the Road Warriors documentary that WWE did, and then Dark Side of the Ring, which was a terrific episode, and peeled back the layers on a few things. But I'm just going to talk about what the Road Warriors meant to me. Now, I'm going to focus on their careers, because I do want to say, I want to briefly address, yes, if we focus on all the personal things that wrestlers have done and how they are outside the ring, then we're not going to have a lot of nice things to say about people that we hold in high regard. So I'm just going to say that right here. I'm not saying it's okay, but focusing on the careers, Animal and Hawk had one of the greatest tag team careers of all time. Because look at what they did. Where they started training. Ole Anderson bringing them in, because he needed a team on short notice. Hawk and Animal were trained by Eddie Sharkey, so was Barry Darsow, so were others. And yes, their original incarnations, like, being the biker, the leather, and stuff like that, maybe wasn't all that great, but then they started experimenting and getting better. They were in Georgia Championship Wrestling, and were instantly over. Of course they would be instantly over, because you look at these guys, nobody looked like that. They were built like brick houses, and they could move really goddamn well, and they would just beat the shit out of people, and they couldn't really wrestle, and they knew that, and they accepted that. They had to be presented as unbeatable, as invincible, as people you couldn't hurt unless you cheated and, did something underhanded to get them down. And, Hawk and Animal fed off that and would get huge reactions everywhere they went. Now, yes, in the beginning, Georgia Championship Wrestling, they were finding their groove. And then they were in the AWA. And you were really goddamn over there. Of course they would be. You got Minneapolis. Minneapolis, Chicago, wherever, they were from Chicago, Illinois, but the Minneapolis, the Minnesota connection. They were really over, of course, in the AWA, and they were a big shot in the arm for the AWA at that time. They were a great tag team addition for them, and showed, hey, this team can, this company is bringing in some young talent and some new talent, and they got over big time. They had some great goddamn matches. They won gold there. They went to Crockett, NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions. They were also making tours of Japan for Giant Baba and getting huge money over there and being big draws. I mean, how could they not be? You bring guys, Gaijin, or Gaijin, I think is how it's said. You bring them over there, and how are they not going to be, a team that you will instantly look at? Especially for the Japanese fans. Giant Baba would love, having them over there, because they could, work with his talent, and they could be big money draws. And then in NWA Jim Crockett Promotions, you take a look at them working with the Midnight Express. That great feud, in the Skywalkers match, the scaffold match, where Cornette ended up suffering the, busted knee, because that was, oh boy, that was something else. But the Road Warriors, working with Eaton and Condrey, you could tell that Eaton and Condrey taught them a whole lot, and that they fed off that. The Road Warriors were perfectly, booked as great, unbeatable monsters for so long. Yes, you could do the DQ finish where, maybe they almost won the title, and it worked, except at Starrcade 87 when they were in Chicago, and they should have won the titles there, but, then how do you get the title off of them? They had a really, really great career. They wrestled the Steiners a number of times. Not that often, but, a few times, like at Starrcade 89. And the Steiners are my second favorite tag team of all time. So seeing those two titans clash was fucking great. Yes, if you go behind the scenes and that there were various, drug, alcohol problems that Hawk had, and I'm sure Animal had his own issues. There were obvious personal issues, and But still, the team kept rolling on, even during the Jim Herd era, when Jim Herd didn't know what the fuck he was doing, and you had Hawk and Animal still hugely over. Everywhere they went, the spike. Paul Ellering, I haven't even mentioned Paul Ellering, sadly being the only one of the three alive. He was able to channel Hawk and Animal's, anger and power and everything in the promos and be, smart, articulate, and address, like the opponents and everything and say, oh, you could talk about the Hawk, you talk about the Animal. And then, Animal would say his stuff and everything. We're going to get you, we're going to beat you down, and we're going to take your head off. Tell him, Hawk. Well, and, I can't do the voices correctly, but looking at what they did just in WCW, even during, the mismanagement eras, they did some really good shit. They went to WWE. They captured gold there. They didn't have the best run there. Then they did have the split in 92, and that's been talked about and stuff like that. And then they did reunite in WCW briefly, and then in WWE for a little bit. Then the Hawk personal issue storyline that I did not care for. By the time they got to, out of 92, they were a very watered down Road Warriors. And, they were Legion of Doom in WWE. And then they did a brief reuniting in, I believe they were reunited a little bit in the beginning of NWA TNA, and then also for a couple matches in WWE in 03 just before Hawk unfortunately passed away. And then Animal did his career on his own and teamed with Heidrich and stuff like that. We're just going to ignore that stuff. But Animal and Hawk meant a whole lot to tag team wrestling, to professional wrestling in general. And if it wasn't for them, I don't think tag team wrestling would have been elevated into the main event as much. Now, I'm not taking anything away from any of the great tag teams in the territories, in Jim Crockett Promotions at that time, in the AWA, even in WWE. I'm not taking anything away from any of those teams, that they were all very tremendous in their own way. Whether they were technical, whether they were power teams, whether they were just over because of their look, didn't matter. But the Road Warriors were 100% the best tag team, in my personal opinion. And just looking at everything they all the gold they captured. Maybe not the greatest promos, but they were fired up. You believed them. You believed whatever the fuck they were saying, and because Ellering mainly shouldered it. And when Hawk and Animal had something to focus on, and yes, this is a tribute to Animal, but you can't talk about the Road Warrior, you can't talk about Animal without talking about Hawk, because they were tied together. Even though Hawk has not been with us for 17 years, and they did have brief periods where they were separated as a team, you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And they meant a lot to each other. The haircuts. I mean, I didn't even mention the haircuts. The thing where it looked like they were going to plug in and do that kind of stuff. Watching what they could do in the ring. It looked like they would take someone's head off. Because that's how they hit. They had great matches if you worked with them and understood how they needed to work, and they needed to have these power, periods where they just would eventually maybe get cheated and knocked down, but then they could come back because they were not technicians. They were never going to be technicians, and they knew that. And they didn't have to be. That was a great thing about watching the Road Warriors. They were different, they were unique, and they will always stand out. I could watch Road Warrior matches from 80s Crockett or late 80s, early 90s WCW, and even some of the stuff that they did in WWE, and it still holds up. And I can't say that about a lot of teams. That's all due respect to so many of the tag teams that have come since. But the Road Warriors, greatest tag team of all time. I know some people may argue that, and that's perfectly okay. So yeah, just focusing on the career, not any how they were outside the ring. It's hard to argue that the Road Warriors weren't the greatest tag team of all time. It's hard to argue against that. So honestly, rest in peace. Rest in peace, Animal. Rest in peace, Animal. I hope that you and Hawk can have some great matches there in the afterlife, whoever the fuck you're wrestling. And yeah, man, it's really goddamn tough. I'm going to end this right here, but just let's share memories of Animal and Hawk. Keep their memory alive. The Road Warriors, the greatest tag team of all time. Let's do what we can. Share your favorite memories in the comments. Anyway, see you soon, guys.